What if perfectionism isn't really about high standards? What if you're not afraid of making something bad? What if you're afraid your best might not be as good as you hoped? That's a very different fear. It hides behind explanations that sound completely reasonable. I'm just taking my time. I still need to improve it. It's not ready yet. For years, I believed every one of those explanations. I told myself I cared about quality, that I didn't want to put something into the world unless it was good, really good. And that sounded responsible. It sounded mature. But when I looked closer, I realized something uncomfortable. A lot of what I was calling high standards had very little to do with excellence. It had everything to do with protecting myself. If you've ever avoided starting something because you knew it wouldn't come out the way you imagined it, subscribe. Let's talk about what perfectionism is really protecting. This is follow-through. What happens after motivation fades? I used to say things like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it right. And I believed that. But there was a pattern I couldn't ignore. Whenever I wasn't sure something would turn out the way I pictured it in my head, I delayed. I researched more, planned more, refined the idea before it even existed. Sometimes I didn't start at all. Not because I didn't want it, because I didn't want to discover what my current level actually looked like. That's the part perfectionism hides. As long as something stays in your head, it can't disappoint you. It stays ideal, untouched, untested, and you get to keep believing in the version of yourself who could have. Eventually, I understood something I hadn't wanted to admit. Perfectionism wasn't pushing me toward excellence. It was protecting me from exposure. If you don't finish, nobody can evaluate you. If you don't publish, nobody can judge you. If you don't give your full effort, you can always tell yourself, I could have done better. I use that sentence a lot. I could have. It protected my potential. But it also kept that potential imaginary. Because the moment something is finished, it becomes evidence. Reality replaces imagination. And reality doesn't negotiate. It simply shows you where you are. Sometimes that's encouraging. Sometimes it isn't. That's what perfectionism tries to avoid. Not mediocrity. Exposure. This was the hardest realization for me. I wasn't afraid of producing something imperfect. I was afraid that my best effort might not match the identity I'd built in my head. That's a vulnerable place to be, because it forces you to update the story you've been telling yourself, and updating that story can feel like losing something. If you've always believed you were capable of much more, that you just hadn't applied yourself yet, perfectionism protects that belief. It lets you stay talented, in theory, instead of tested, in reality. I realized something else too. Most of the time, I wasn't chasing excellence. I was trying to avoid disappointment. I was avoiding the moment when I'd have to look at something I'd finished and say, this is what I can do today. For a long time, that sentence felt heavier than leaving another project unfinished. What changed everything wasn't repeating, done is better than perfect. I'd heard that phrase 100 times. It never changed my behavior. The question that changed me was different. Instead of asking, how do I make this better? I started asking, what am I trying not to find out? That question has a way of exposing fear almost immediately, because perfectionism is rarely about the work itself. It's usually about identity. Once I understood that, I stopped chasing perfect outcomes. I started collecting honest information. Every finished project gives you information. Every imperfect attempt gives you information. And that's how competence is built. Competence creates confidence. Confidence slowly replaces fear. But none of that happens while the work only exists in your imagination. Eventually, reality has to replace the fantasy. And yes, that's uncomfortable. There's no shortcut around it. You don't overcome perfectionism by lowering your standards. You overcome it by becoming willing to see yourself clearly and letting that version grow. That takes courage. Not loud courage. Quiet courage. The kind that finishes anyway. Stay. That's where trust is rebuilt. If this felt uncomfortably accurate, like the video, it helps this reach people who are still hiding behind high standards. And if you're serious about finishing instead of refining forever, subscribe. We're building this properly.